Instagram. Hello, LinkedIn. Hello, YouTube. I'm Brian Miller, and I am back with another episode of Shadow School today, where we dive into a specific gene key, starting with the shadow, work our way through the gift and the city. I'm feeling just so blessed to be here with you today. We are exploring the 37th gene key, the shadow of weakness, the gift of equality, the city of tenderness. We have a dilemma of submission, and there's always a particular victim state associated with each gene key. This one is victim of your gender identity. And so we'll explore what that means going through each of these different frequencies. Let's start off with an overview of the 37th gene key. We are in the midst, if you watched the 55, which we did last week, we're in the midst of a great change that is unfolding. Hi, Briscoe. Yes, one of the dogs needs to move, of course, right after I've gone live. Come on, buddy. Go find a bed. He's migrating to the sunshine, as he always does, as we should all do. We are in the midst of a great change on Earth with humanity. And there are a lot of things happening at once. Hold on a second. Go on, Ted. Come on. Up. Come on. Let Briscoe be. Come on, Briscoe. Come on. Come on. Hurry up, please. Good boy. Okay. Oh, the dog drama. Goodness. We're in the midst of a great change. Thanks for sticking with me there for a second. So when you go live, you can't pause the video and take Teddy bear. Come here. Oh my goodness. All the drama. Teddy. Thank you. No Borkies. Oh my goodness. This is life, everyone. This is life. Where were we? We are talking about the big change that's happening everywhere. We have more people dropping into their heart, more soul dropping into human bodies. We have more human bodies capable of holding more soul and more spirit energy. So we have this involution of spirit coming into the human form, and we have evolution, which is the human and the physical form evolving and being capable of holding more energy. And so these forces are happening all at once. What that means is that we also have a balance of masculine and feminine, yang and yin forces coming through too that need to be balanced, that have been out of balance for a very long time. In order for us to evolve, to bring more spirit through, we actually have to create more balance. That's one of the things we're going to be talking about in the 37th gene key today. Many more things happening in this great change, but that's our focus for the 37th gene key. And here we're really focusing on this balance aspect, the balance of yin and yang energetic forces, or feminine and masculine energetic forces. When I say throughout this session, male, female, feminine, masculine, I'm talking about the underlying energetic force. I'm not talking about a physical human body unless I specifically point to it. I'm not pointing to a gender identity unless I specifically point to it in this session. So bear with me. I'm asking you to have open mind, open heart, and hear some of these concepts without having that immediate bias hop into the game, okay? So we are having a giant shift in archetypal mythology. Up until now, in the last couple of decades, it has been critical for humans and human evolution to prize those who are the strongest physically, or those who can get power physically or subversively, whatever that looks like. And typically that has been men. And here I am talking about actual males. The physical form of males in this world tends to be stronger, tends to be. And so we, in order to survive, in order to get to where we are, we have prized this to an extent to where now it is out of balance with the feminine energy on the planet. And not only the feminine energy in terms of women and women actual bodies being submissive to male bodies on the planet, which we're seeing everywhere still, but the feminine energy has been repressed. And this looks like in women and in men and all bodies on the planet, the feminine energy has been suppressed. And so our psyches themselves are out of balance. Our actual physical systems are out of balance. Because with the masculine energy and the female energy come different gifts and different forces. For example, one that we'll point to in this particular gene key, one that's really easy to understand, is the left side of the brain, which is connected more to that yang or masculine energetic force, classifies things, separates things. That's where we have analysis and logic and language, right? So it classifies things, it looks at details, it looks at individual pieces of things. That's an amazing ability. However, if it's on its own and it's all that we've prized, then what do we end up with? We end up with things that are overly structured, overly classified, overly identified with. We end up with things that are very divided, hierarchical, and separate. And we end up as humans feeling disconnected and separate from everything else. We feel and we act in this society because we have that type of energy force dominating how we have formed our social structures and our psyches. We end up feeling like we are just these tiny pieces that are just maneuvering, and therefore we have to maneuver, we have to make things happen, we have to change our position, we have to get over here. That's what's happening when we have this survival of the fittest, or how we classify or just look at individual pieces. If you look at the opposite side of the pole, the other spectrum, because that's how these things are represented, it's a duality. There's a polarity between the two forces. On the other side of the pole is the feminine or yin energetic force. And continuing this same example, what we have over here is the aptitude of the right brain, which is actually on this side, funnily enough, is the aptitude to see a bigger picture, to view things more holistically, more fluid, less structure, less linearity, if that's a word. And we see everything. And so you get the idea that there's almost like a field that you can see into and create into from this right brain yin feminine energy perspective. And that on its own is incredible, but it's also extremely intangible. It's also seeming, if we don't have trust in anything, chaotic and disorderly, because it's just fluid and moving around. There's no steps in place. And so you can see how the balance of the two energetic forces, all of the gifts and capabilities, not just those that I've given the example for, there are a bunch more, how bringing them together actually allows us to see the entire whole, to feel connected as humans, to feel connected to the earth and something greater, that's that feminine side, and to see the detail, to measure and to make and to put some structure that makes sense around the detail so that we have both. That's where we're going right now. And in order to go there, the feminine energy that has been suppressed in every body on the earth has to rise. And so we are seeing more feminine archetypes, more archetypal feminine forces in mythology, And it's starting to come through our culture as well and the images that we're seeing. Okay. So there's going to be this flood of feminine archetypes. The 37th gene key, overall, we start in weakness, and then we get to tenderness. Weakness, equality, tenderness. The 37th gene key, if we look at the trajectory of that story, concerns an energetic force of nature that was once perceived as being weak, that actually, it turns out, was really strong all along. That's the journey we're looking at here. So let's dive into the shadow. As we get into the shadow, let's give one more. Yeah. Basically, I mentioned we have this evolutionary progress where we've really prioritized physical strength and dominance as being what we need in order to survive. Now, and we have been entering an age, which is why there's so much friction and tension for some time, that's no longer necessary for survival of the human race. And so we need to reprioritize what we see as strength in the human animal. And so we need to look and examine at our shadow and our beliefs that exist in the shadows around weakness and what we perceive as being weak. Before we get to what we perceive as being strong, we have to look at what we find to be weak. I know myself, asking for help was something that I always looked at as a weakness. So this hyper independence was always something I was focused on, very unconsciously. I know that that exuded itself in, like, someone would open the door for me and I would have an overreaction as a woman to someone opening the door for me, and I would just have such an attitude about it, and I would be like, "I'm not a wilting violet over here. Like, I can open a door for myself." And that was a little bit of, like, the attitude of, like, justification, like, "I'm not weak. Also, I don't wanna be seen as weak, and I don't need help from anyone." Like, it starts to, in the shadow state, if we have the repressed feminine in the shadow state, and we don't want to be perceived as weak, especially physically weak or weak in any ways that this shadow brings across in our beliefs, we end up like swinging completely to the other end of the spectrum and how we react and respond in the situation. And so you'll see that when we get to the repressive and the reactive state. But let's look at this. We have a projection in our psyches that male and physical strength means strong, and feminine and lack of physical strength, and many other attributes that are weak. And so we have this dominant sex that we prioritize, and all of our structures have been built to reflect this dominance. Like I said, we have the male energy dominated psyche in everybody on earth. And as a result, we've created these social systems, primarily things like hierarchy or organized religion or any number of things where we have structured, classified, but we've also disconnected humans from their actual first person experience with most of life. And that's because we think that we're powerless, and we think that a lot of us have weakness. And so we need to prioritize order, control, and support. There is an underlying fear here of lack of support because the male psyche is so dominant that we have that separation from everything greater. And so we have no trust in the universe that surrounds us. And we have no connection to anything outside of our individual selves. And when that happens, we feel like we are floating on an island by ourselves. We're untethered. We have absolutely no support. Nothing's got our back. And therefore, what do? We try to control. We try to create stability. We try to create certainty. And we do that by building up all of these structures, rules, laws, systems to govern us as if we're children. Because there's no trust in anything helping us. And then, of course, that reflects into no trust on our own. We have no strength on our own, actually. That's one of the biggest fears. In this new age, that's starting to change. And what is fascinating about what happens with humans as we evolve, especially as it relates to things related to the psyche or emotions or like the actual evolution of the human system, I'll say, is that we often swing to the opposite. When we're in the shadow, we sense a weakness and we want to fix it. And then we swing to the complete opposite of the spectrum in order to fix it. That must be the solution. That must be how we balance things. And so here we have this reaction of so much more feminism. Feminism is a great thing. Please do not get me wrong here. All of it's great. I have no judgment here for any of this. But what that can express itself as a justification of now this sex is better than that sex. Now feminine energy is better than male energy. That's the real savior. The future is female. Like we get all of these energies coming through. And what that does is it actually serves to create a huge amount of tension and conflict and discomfort between the two poles. And then what do we do as humans? Because we're still in the shadow here. We dig our heels in the ground and we have this conflict. And we make it so tense and so uncomfortable that we can't even talk about it. And if we can't even talk about it and express our feelings about it and express our ideas about it and get to the edges of it and look inside of ourselves to see what is in the shadow that's driving this tension and conflict, we just put more tension and conflict in here. If we can never get to the underlying opportunity, the curriculum that sits inside of this conflict, then we just have this fighting and these poles, and we're all in the shadow. And we're not actually creating the balance that we need to create. We've just swung to the other side of the spectrum. Okay, so let's talk about that. Whew. In the shadow of weakness, we're going to see new versions of strength moving through. And those versions of strength can claim power just like the old versions of strength did, and work within the systems and keep things going as is. Or we can catch on this idea that we need to have more balance, more feminine energy in every psyche and every body on the earth to balance out the masculine energy. And from there, we can actually find some equilibrium. And we can be open to and exploring this great change that's happening that we're all a part of, as opposed to blaming, complaining, pointing fingers, creating more tension and fighting and conflict in this situation. Okay, let me just dive into some notes here. I think that's point one of victim of gender identity, which is like, we've had men up here, women down here. Now we're trying to do this, and we don't need to do this. We need to do this. We need to do this. And just recognize like one or the other is not the right answer. It's all of it together. There is no better than. We all need to be balanced with all of the energies ourselves. And so we over-identify with a specific gender, a specific energetic, a specific any kind of identity in our lives, any kind of role, any type of I am this. It can limit us. It can create polarity in our lives, and it can limit us. And so I just want to leave with that here in the shadow. We are creating more division. What's fascinating, though, is that it's beautiful because that is one of the steps that humans have to take. We have to kind of claim and catch on to and try on new archetypes and try on new identities. So if you're hearing me say this and you are in a space in your life where you are really claiming an identity, great. That's beautiful. Own it. But don't own it in a way where you're trying to get other people to see it. Own it in a way that it's actually embodied in you, whether others see it or not. And then when you do that, you'll recognize you are actually doing the work of accepting yourself and loving yourself, which is really what's needed for you to be that in the world. And from that perspective, it becomes less and less necessary for you to attach yourself to any one particular identity, role, idea, concept. And you can release it and you can become much more than that, much more than that one label. Okay. So let's talk about that. Not that, but into the shadow. I have actually sped through all of my notes without turning the pages. So give me a second to catch up here. All right, let's talk about this lack of fear of support, because this is important. And this is, for me, connected to some of the work I'm doing personally this year around my word of trust. And I've mentioned it before, probably in a different episode, but I've been taking this course called Living in the Gift by Charles Eisenstein. And it's a fantastic course. If you're interested in it, go to his website. He's the author of many books like Sacred Economics and The More Beautiful World That Your Heart Knows Is Possible and things like that. I might have messed up that title. He has created some courses, this one included Living in the Gift, that you can pay anything to access, including nothing. So you've got no excuse. Living in the gift means that we are actually living in a universe, in a quantum field that has as one of its fundamental laws this concept of gift and receiving. Abundance and prosperity are not, I do this so I get that. They are simply, I give of myself freely and I receive more than enough in return. And it isn't necessarily always a one-to-one cause and effect of I give, I receive. We give knowing that we are supported, that we are held, that we're living in the gift, and that we'll probably receive back tenfold what we gave. But we can't predict how or what it will be or when. Okay? It may just be an energy. It may be something that's completely intangible to us that we're unaware of. And that's what we're speaking to here when we look at the shadow and we see this lack of support, a fear of lack of support. When we are so disconnected, when that yang energy is so dominant in our psyche, we are cut off from this abundance. We're in scarcity, we're in lack. We're counting our coins and hoarding our acorns. We're looking at how much we have in comparison to the next person over here, because remember, we're all separate and we're classified and we're in this hierarchy, which creates more division. And what happens is that we have this deep-seated fear and a lack of trust. A lack of trust in the collective, a lack of trust in ourselves, a lack of trust in the universe, and that it's got our back, and that it is actually founded in love, not chaos, and it's here to support us. It's an act, it's, like a space and a field of gifts and abundance. And because we can't see this, we restrict our own giving. Because we fear we won't receive, in return, we don't trust giving. So you can see how we are getting so compartmentalized, we're getting so fragile. Honestly, weakness to me, if I could rename this, it's like fragility. Because we're separating ourselves off from all of the sources of love and support and generosity and receiving in the world. If we don't trust enough to give, we certainly don't trust enough to receive. And even if we are surrounded, which we quite literally are, by a universe full of giving, we cannot receive if we are blocking that. And we have this distrust and we're in this shadow of weakness and fragility. So we have to move away from our minds running the show, because our minds are keeping us in this fear, scarcity, separation consciousness. And we have to begin allowing our hearts to run the show, the rest of our body and our being to run the show. And we have to have the shift of, if we want to go back to this dynamic of masculine and feminine energy for a second. Feminine energy, the yin energy, is a great field that holds ideas and life force energy in the material reality for us here on Earth. And the great yang, or masculine energy, speaks into existence. It's like if the female energy were listening, the masculine energy would be speaking. Okay? So you can imagine that we have this incredible receptive field that can create and hold so many amazing creations in this physical material world. And we are completely subverting it and pretending like it doesn't exist. And then we have this intense creative manifesting masculine energy over here that has the power to create and destroy. And right now it has absolutely no anchor. That's the feminine energy over here. It has no anchor. And as a result, it's creating all kinds of things that have no soul or spirit. The underlying ideals are missing. It's all just in the mind: scarcity, protection, stability, control, dominance. And we need to shift such that we have the anchor in the ground, in the field of this feminine receptive energy, and the masculine energy works through it. So ultimately, the feminine energy is the field that the masculine works through. And so it's like the feminine can hold the vision and the masculine builds the vision. That's where we are getting to in this gift of equality and in tenderness. Remember, the yin side, the feminine side, can see the bigger picture, the full vision. And that's what we need in order to be a collective, to operate out of more connection. And so this masculine energy that's really good at creating structures, creating and destroying and doing all these things, needs to come and serve through the feminine energy force. Okay? That's the same concept here I'm pointing to with the mind and the heart. The heart is through which we need to pour love, make decisions, like actually lead, give from, be from in a place as humans. And then the mind needs to come serve through, serve the heart, as opposed to the mind being in control. I need a drink. I don't mean alcohol. I mean coffee. Okay, repressive, reactive. If you've been listening to this, you know. Repressive is all about the more passive state, the passive expression or nature is what the Gene Keys calls it, nature, repressive nature. This is where life force energy kind of collapses inward. It's more internally expressed. And here we have the nature of over sentimental. So in the shadow of weakness, the repressive nature is over sentimental. And when people are experiencing this repressive nature, acting from this repressive nature, it manifests in inauthentic giving. So we're kind of giving in order to receive. We're giving in order for others to see that we're good people, to be validated in our giving. We are in this state ruled by our emotions, distinct from being ruled by our hearts. I want to make that distinction very clear. Emotions are not something that are possessed by the human, even though we feel like they are. We can have emotions, identify with emotions, feel emotions. Emotions are simply energy in motion. They are passing through us to communicate information. And being and living from the heart is very different than it's very different than being ruled by or leading through your emotions. I'm sure you've experienced either yourself or being around a person who is completely overtaken and consumed by their emotions and their emotional state. And that is exhausting to be around, frankly. It's kind of exhausting. And I think those people in this state, in this over sentimental state, feel like they're living through their heart. They're wearing their heart on their sleeve. They can crack at any second. They're very emotionally turbulent. They're not actually living from the heart. They're not wearing their heart on their sleeve. They are a victim to their emotional state. That's what's happening here in over sentimental. We are in this state repressing fears. This person can speak great words about humanity. However, they don't have the backbone to actually be that or to make the change of that in the world, to take a stand. They're victims to their emotion, giving the heart a bad name is what the Gene Keys calls it. They hide in their emotions, which actually distract them and obscure them from seeing deeper truths underneath. So emotions can, I need another drink. Emotions can show us and be great teachers to deeper fears, wounds, shadows that are lurking beneath the surface. However, if we're attached to these emotions and we identify with them and we are a victim to these emotions, that's not what they're showing us. They're actually keeping us in this drama that's playing out, and we're not actually looking at what's underneath the surface. We're distracted from it. And so these deeper truths, these shadows, but also gifts are hiding inside of us. And they overprocess at an emotional level. So they're really draining, like I said, for others to be around. And they're addicted to the emotional states that they're in. So I think we talk a lot about that in distraction, in a different gene key. I can't remember if we've gone through that one or not. But this idea that we are so fueled to distract ourselves in life, and we've got to create some balance here and equilibrium. Let's dive into the reactive nature of the shadow of weakness. And here we have cruel. The reactive nature is outwardly expressed, it's more active, it's fueled and kind of connected by anger to being a projection out toward others. And the reactive nature of cruel in the shadow of weakness, you can understand we've been talking about a dominance of masculine energetic force, of control, of hierarchy, of seeing things as weak or powerful. And we here in cruel see everything as inequality. And we're judging other people and ourselves according to this measuring stick. Our hearts become very, it says hardened, but to me, it's like dried up like a prune or a raisin or something like that. They're like calcified organs. And we begin to forget what love feels like. We're so not operating in the heart. We're really in the mind. We're really in the fear here. Those that are experiencing that cruel nature are really seeing everyone else, probably, unless there's someone else just as ruthless next to them. Everyone else is very over sentimental, just like how weak they are by being ruled by their emotions. And as a result, the people experiencing the reactive, cruel nature, they actually capitalize on that and take advantage of anyone that is willing to be taken advantage of. And so in over sentimental, we have this view of ourselves as being weak, and we're just like in this drama of our lives ruled by our emotions. I just wear my heart on my sleeve. And here in cruel, we are seeing those people and we are preying on them. And so we have this cycle that gets perpetuated of a victim and abuser state in the shadow of weakness with cruel and over sentimental, taking advantage of good nature. And here we can only have people in this cruel state if we are having people that are willing to be victims, that are willing to stay in the victim state, that are willing to be subverted, that are willing to be taken advantage of. And in order to remove this cruelty, these cruel figures, people, archetypes, energy, I guess you could call it, we need to rise in our communities no longer as victims. That's the solution here. So I have a couple of questions to ask you. And this is, are we submitting to the victim inside us? Where are you submitting? Where are you submitting? Where are you a victim? Yeah. My courage is weakened by my perception of unity, feeling like the lone warrior in a war. Thank you for sharing that. Tap into that feminine energy. Tap into that heart. Tap into knowing that you're not alone. You're never alone. You know you're not alone because you're sitting here watching me and I'm a warrior too. Okay, so only those who are no longer victims of their own or others' emotions can break the victim abuser pattern. So we have to beware of this emotional energy and it ruling us. Okay, let us go into the gift of equality. But before we do that, I want to leave you with one final piece as it relates to the shadow and this victim state, which is we can only work on our own victim state. We cannot get other people to see or lift out of their own victim state by asking them, cajoling them, controlling them, showing them, telling them, pulling them along. What will help them move out of their victim state is if we do the work to move out of our own victim state and actually hold the space with a very different energy. Okay? Because the second that we try to cajole, talk, tell, show, move someone else, will recognize that they will fight to stay in the victim state. And I'm sure that you probably have an example of this, working with someone else, being in a fight with someone else, and they just cannot see beyond, or they refuse to move beyond identifying with the victim state that they're in. And it's crazy because you're like, there's so much possibility and power over here. What are you doing? But we like fight to stay where we're comfortable and where we feel safe, even though we don't feel safe there, really. Even though we're unhappy, we're miserable there. That's something that humans tend to do there. And it's because we feel very disconnected from everything. If we knew that there's a universe around us that has our back, we're much more likely to release control and to evolve and to let go of this stuff where we're like, this is no longer serving me. So just know we'll fight. So I want you to think about and consider, contemplate here. Is there a time? Are you doing it now? Are you fighting? Are you justifying? Are you getting something out of staying stuck in the victim state that you're in? And you know you're in a victim state if you are complaining, if you are blaming, and if you feel like something external is messing with your reality. Okay? So this is something to contemplate. Let's move into the gift of equality, and we'll speed up here because I know I've really, really dug into the shadow of weakness today and all of these energy dynamics. I hope that you're finding this helpful because there's so much to dive into with all of these gene keys. There's so much to dive into with all the concepts that sit underneath of the gene keys. I'm trying to find the right balance here for you so that you're sticking with me and it's sinking in and really making a difference. Let's move into the gift of equality. This gift is all about support. So where we felt like we had a fear or a lack of support when we were disconnected from everything else, we feel like we're just like these little weak humans and we have no support. Here in the gift of equality, we actually come into stages where we're unlocking our unique gifts and we recognize we're connected to one another. We're connected to something much bigger. And so, there's There's so much support, and we're living in the gift. I want to talk about equality. Equality, again, is one of these human words, one of these concepts where we want it. We all feel like it's an ideal that we can achieve human to human to human. And we're living in a reality where some people are born with disabilities. Some people are born into poverty or different racial classes or structures or different tribes, different places on the planet, I could go on and on and on and on. And it's really difficult to see equality when everyone is born into different circumstances. But I want you to just hold with me for a moment that equality is not about the circumstances of your life. Equality is actually a matter of perception. It depends on your frequency. And what we find here in this gift of equality is that it's all about living in an ideal of equality that lifts people out of the games of being winners or losers, the games of being victims, abusers, abused, whatever that looks like. And what the Gene Keys offers is that there is definitely an area where we are all equal, and that is the area of our unique genius. It says that we're all equal to the task that we've come here for. And our unique genius is the elixir to that curriculum that we have. And our genius, in order for us to find this equality through our unique genius, it's actually rooted in self-love. We discover our genius through self-love, not an outer achievement. So equality is not, I have this much and you have this much, and it's equal. Equality is not, I'm in this position and you're in this position, and it's equal. Equality is not, you're this gender and you're this gender, it's equal. Here in the gift of equality, we are dealing with our genius, our unique genius, and what we can express and bring to the world through our essence is where we are all equal, different and equal, all equally as valuable and important. No one more or less important than another. I think that's beautiful. That does not mean that we are living in an equal or fair structure that we've created for ourselves right now. And that, I think, is what creates so much disharmony and lack of feeling of fairness and equality. But inside of that, we have to recognize that we are all born with this ability to have our unique genius come through and come online through our lives. And in equality, we also begin to look at family systems. And we're looking at the family system and the community too. And how, up until now, this isolated nuclear family has not served us. It's actually, again, repressed the feminine. A lot of the times, one or more parents has to go away from the home in order to pursue some type of outer achievement, to achieve some type of power or equality, perceived equality in life, so that we can get what we need to, so that we can survive. And here, as we move into equality, it's much more about self-love, unlocking the hidden genius within, balancing the energetics of our psyche for that yin-yang, feminine, masculine, energetic balance, so that we're more whole human beings and all of our energetics and powers can come online. And it's a new vision for the family. Now, it does not offer a specific family structure here. It's not saying don't do the thing that you're doing right now. What it is saying is we need a society founded in liberation of the love that exists inside of a family unit. So there's a love, this dynamic that exists between a parent and a child, unfettered. Like imagine when that child's first born, this love that exists. And right now, that love is locked into a one-on-one relationship. It's locked into maybe a tiny family dynamic. And here, the gift of equality asks that this love be liberated from this family unit so that it's actually connecting all humans. So when we get into this gift of equality, we start to see that we are one family. And there isn't a particular structure here that it's recommending for us. What it is recommending for us is that we as adults, as parents, as stewards of the families and communities that we are in, balance the energetics of the masculine and feminine energy in our being, such that all of our unique genius can come online through self-love, through examining and integrating and embracing and loving our shadows, so that we can release all of the victim state, we can be in this state of freedom and liberation. And as a result, our energy, our aura literally changes, and we become this field of love, such that when children enter the scene, whether they're our children, they've come from us, they're part of our community, they're part of the bigger human family, those children are held in a space where they are nurtured and supported from day one to express their unique genius and to feel supported in a way that they have never felt disconnected from the other, disconnected from the collective, and disconnected from the entirety of the human family. That's what we're getting to. So it's like, parents, do your work. Adults, do your work. Do your work to balance the psyche. Do your work of self-love to unlock your genius and to bring it online so that you can stand in your full power in your genius in the world, in balance, in equality with every other human, so that we can raise this new generation of children from the get-go. So they don't have to go through this process of shadows and forgetting that they were part of something bigger and then having to have the battle of reconnecting. No, we can support them from the outset to know they're supported. That's where we're getting. So this is an archetype of unconditional love, and it's based on giving without need for return. Here again, we have this giving, living in the gift, giving without having to receive, giving from our hearts fully from its space of unconditional love. We talk about unconditional love a lot. Humans on this earth do not have examples of unconditional love. That relationship between a parent and a child is supposed to have unconditional love there. Very highly, it does not, because of the unhealed wounds and shadows of the parent that get projected. Because the parents are typically a victim of their emotions. Because on a large scale, many parents have not actually reached the developmental level of being a mature adult. And this is classified by psychology, by the way. There is a maturity level of mature adult that many adults do not actually develop into. That's what's required in order for us to be in a state where we're not ruled by our emotions, we're not ruled by our shadows, where we have a balance in our psyche of energies, and where we can then be a vehicle for unconditional love for ourselves, to heal each other and to heal the children, to bring the children up in such a way they don't have to heal like we have. Okay, so this is all about seeing our weakness from that shadow as opportunity for growth, maturity, and prosperity. And the area of our being that we consider the weakest. So ponder for a moment the area of your being, the thing maybe you fear the most. You don't want people to see you, hide it away because you don't want to be perceived as being weak or insecure and, unable to be. That area that you consider the weakest is the place where you can actually be the strongest and thrive the most. That requires that, one, just like you've been doing with all these shadows with me, that you actually acknowledge that that place that you've been perceiving and hiding as being weak is actually where all the power and possibility lives. And you've got to go there. You've got to look in there. You've got to sit with it in order for you to actually see the power and possibility in it. Okay. I've got 10 minutes before I have another meeting, and we've got to get through this city state now. City of Tenderness. I know there were other things in this gift here. I'm sorry I didn't get to, but I've got to go read the book. I've got to pop over into the City of Tenderness. Here, we are going to work with the archetype of Christ. Please just don't come with your pitchfork. Just pause. Yes, he's a religiously co-opted figure, and many people have many ideas about him as a being, as a person, as a figure, as whatever. We are using Christ here as an archetype. So just like we use the shadows and the gifts and all of the gene keys as archetypes, we're going to look at the Christ figure as an archetype here. So just hold that in your being. Allow any discomfort to just sit there and just push a pause on that button. Okay? I'm not coming for your beliefs. I'm asking you to be open here. So Christ as an archetypal figure, not through the lens of religion, is a symbol of what we were talking about earlier in the shadow of weakness as we move through the gift of equality now into tenderness, where there was once a figure or a human or an energetic force of nature that was perceived as being weak, that turned out to be extraordinarily strong. Now, how does this relate to the archetype of Christ? Well, imagine if you're the Roman army and you're seeing Christ, you're crucifying him on the cross. You see him as this weak, pathetic figure, perceived to be as weak because he said, I'm going to do it. I'll be sacrificed for this. I'll be on the cross. It's okay. That's perceived as being weak. I'm sure his followers were like, what the heck, man? You've got all these powers. Why are you not saving yourself? How weak that is. Perceived as weak. And then the resurrection, of course, comes. Now we recognize he was extraordinarily strong, and strong not just from coming back from the resurrection, but strong spiritually in the way that he knew, he trusted in being supported this whole time. So that is a poorly told analogy for you of the Christ archetype as a figure that was initially perceived as weakness, moving into strength. Okay, so this is a myth also for Christ is also a figure that anchors the blending and the marriage, the inner marriage of the masculine and feminine. And so we have a kind of a new synthesis of the Trinity. The Father, that's like the prime yang masculine energy. The Holy Spirit represents the prime yin or the feminine energy, that field. And then the Christ in this Trinity represents an equalizing force that unites those two polarities of yin and yang, masculine and feminine energy. And so this archetype represents this inner marriage, this balancing, this hieroskamos, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, of these two energetic forces. And that's where we're getting to in this entire gene key, but we're moving into the City of Tenderness. Tenderness is all about this stunning energy, like we talked about this love in the family unit between parent and child that gets liberated out into the world. It's like that. It's an anchor of unconditional love that has no desire, no force, no manipulation, no agenda, no sexuality in it at all. And it's being able to anchor each other in our families and our communities and the greater human community in this energy of tenderness. And I have much more to share here, but it's really like the biggest point for me to leave you with is that it basically creates a climate. And where many of the cities are, in fact, rising up in individual humans, as they access these Siddhic divine realization states, in the 37th gene key with the Siddhi of Tenderness, we see this Siddhic state emerging through the collective, through the family unit, through communities, which is quite gorgeous. So that allows us then to create a very different energetic force through how we show up together in community, in our families, how we're connected, how we raise children, how we have more balance on the planet, how we become stewards of the planet. And so what we once recognized as something that we should subvert or prioritize, that we were once weak and disconnected in the shadow, we, in the gift of equality, recognize that there's a balance to restore. And then in restoring that balance and loving ourselves into wholeness, holding all of the energy of the yin and the yang inside ourselves in inner marriage, we go through the process of self-love to unlock our unique genius. In our unique genius, we are equal to every other human in their unique genius. Just beautifully different faceted crystals, all of the same gem. And then we move into this collective emergent energetic field of tenderness that simply holds, nurtures, supports, and gives to every one of us. That's what I'll leave you with today. Thank you so much for tuning into Shadow School. This is a fun one. Some of these are just so deep. I feel like I didn't even get to everything I wanted to say today. There was just so much to share. And I appreciate you sticking through the disruption of the dogs earlier. You can never control everything, you know? And I'll leave you with this note, which is I have been putting together Gene Key's hologenetic profile podcasts, starting with the activation sequence. And basically what I've done is I've recorded a series of audio files that walks you through what's the gene keys, how to use it, what is the system, how do you work with your hologenetic profile, what are the 3 sequences, and then for your specific activation sequence, I bring to life the sphere, the line, and the gene key for the shadow, the gift, and the Siddhi, all in separate audio files, all in the proper order according to your astrology and your hologenetic profile, for you to contemplate. So you get this, but for your specific gene keys in an amazing order, in a SoundCloud playlist that you can contemplate for years to come. And I've just set it up on my website. If you want to help me build out this library, I've already created a couple of them. They're really fun. I'm getting some great feedback. You can find that on the Muse and Method website. There's a button on there that says Get Your Gene Keys podcast playlist, and you can check out more details if you're interested. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week with yet another beautiful Gene Key shadow. Have an amazing week.